Good morning, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee here as we're coming up on 9 a.m. Eastern Time on the 13th of September as we take a look at the satellite this morning of Hurricane Florence as it gets closer and closer to the Carolina coast. It is clearly obvious from the satellite loop that it is nothing like what it was in terms of the presentation a couple of days ago or even early yesterday. This is it's one of the things that we've been saying all along with respect to trying to forecast these tropical storms and hurricanes is that the track part of the equation has gotten a whole lot better to get a handle on. And actually, when you think about it, the track forecasts are pretty good. Uh, for the most part, they've done exceptionally well. The intensity issue is a different matter, and it's very, very tricky. Everything looked yesterday as if this was going to have one last shot of strengthening, and southerly shear apparently appeared. You started to see the degradation of the cloud cover on the south side of the hurricane, and it sort of spread into the core. This is why it doesn't really look nearly as impressive as it did just again going back to early yesterday and before that. But look, let's make no mistake here about
Mhm.
what's going on. We're still with a Category 2 hurricane. Top winds are 110 miles an hour, even though the edge has been taken off, which is not a surprise. It's still top winds are 110 miles an hour, and the gales have expanded. And I think this is more important. We talked about this yesterday. The Hurricane Center mentioned this yesterday. The expansion of the gales makes storm surge particularly uh, bigger issue for the Carolinas because of the orientation of the coastline and the fact that the storm is coming in from the southeast. So it is going to be pushing a ton of water into Pamlico and Albemarle Sounds and into the Outer Banks and into the barrier beaches up and down the Carolina coast. So that part of the equation has not changed, and in fact has actually expanded a bit. So we have to be, a little bit careful here. The other thing is, regardless of whether this is a Category 1 or a Category 4 or a 3, the rain part of this is going to be still the same. There is going to be uh, big rains for the inland areas of the Carolinas. And eventually, some of that big rain is going to probably work its way up northward into Virginia and West Virginia later on in the weekend. Let me once again emphasize that if you are in the northern fringe of this, all right, you're going to see some high clouds. Then you already seeing them actually in northern areas on the northern fringe. And actually, what's happening is you've got cloudiness that's sitting over the northeast, over my neck of the area of the northeast, and you can't really tell where one ends and the other one begins. But the bottom line is, in terms of precip and real impacts. You're from the Delmarva Peninsula, Maryland, on up, Chesapeake Bay, on up through Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Delaware Bay, southeastern New York City, Philadelphia, Washington D.C., Baltimore, uh, et cetera, et cetera. The impacts from this are going to be this zero. Okay, and that was always the case. That was all. It will remain the case. And we're talking here as far as the landfalling hurricane is concerned. We are with respect to what may happen eventually with the remnant rains for this area as well, for the vast majority of this area as well, except maybe the southernmost fringe of that area I just described. It's not going to be an impact through the weekend as far as the rains are concerned. Okay, so let's just make that clear. There's a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation that goes on out through all of this. The network news media does not help in all of this. All they seem to be interested in doing is spreading, this constant hyperbole using metaphors and similes that are just incredibly inappropriate. They just make my job so much more difficult in trying to keep this on a very real perspective, going with dealing with these storms. Those of you who have been here for a long, long time know that this is basically a no hype zone. We just kind of tell things how it is, and we answer questions honestly. We discuss the dilemma, the forecast dilemmas openly. So there really should be no surprise. One of the things that that I was thinking about with all of this is, when an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft is recording was reporting winds of 140 miles an hour in a hurricane, we report that. Okay, that's what the hurricane is. That's what is in front of us. Then we have to take that apart and come up with, well, what is the hurricane hunter going to find 24 hours from now? We look at what's on the table in terms of the upper air, the meteorology, the dynamics in the atmosphere, and we come up with our best, obviously our best ideas. We use sophisticated computer models, which are not perfect, especially going out forward in time. You do the best you can. Okay. It really doesn't help when you have when you have news media on the network side, and I really don't, which I don't watch, other than the fact that when I'm working, I hear this stuff because it's around me. And I mean, I heard some incredible statements regarding the fact that, and it's nonsense, that we've never seen stuff like this before. Are you kidding me? Really? Really? Category 5 hurricanes from last year, like Irma and Maria, which actually were stronger than this in terms of the peak. And when you say that we've never seen this before, let's take that statement literally. Okay, Fran in 1994, Category 3 landfall, last major to come ashore North Carolina, not the last hurricane to come ashore North Carolina, the last major. Hurricane Hazel in 1954. Strong Category 3. Hugo in South Carolina in 89, Category 4 at landfall. So, I mean, this stuff has happened before. So you lie when you say we've never seen this before. And this just kind of drives me nuts. So, look, you'll always get a hype-free experience here. You will always get a reality. I will always answer your questions honestly regarding all this. I'll give you the information. If you live in the Carolinas, you've had to already have made decisions. And I've said this many, many times as well. You need to go to official websites. You need to shut the TV off. Go to official websites and go to nhc.noaa.gov. You need to go to weather.gov. You need to listen to your local officials. And that's it. I can't answer your local questions, obviously. But that's the place to go and get official information. And you concentrate on that. You have you get the hyperbole and the crap and the nonsense that surrounds you. Shut it off. Go to those sites. Don't use the maps that I put up as something that you use to make decisions. That's not appropriate to use weather models, and because they need to be put into some sense of context, and that's a very difficult thing to do. Even I have trouble with it sometimes because the information is overwhelming. That's why you need to go to the one central place, nhc.noaa.gov, or your local National Weather Service office at weather.gov. Okay, I've ended my morning rant. We're going to start off. We've started off. You can see the satellite there churning away, and I'm going to start bringing up some other stuff weather-wise. So let's get going here. By the way, I just want to test something very fast and see if what I'm thinking works. Hang on one second. Yeah, it actually does. That's very cool. And thanks, guys. James Cipriano, thanks for hitting the super chat. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. So don't worry, you won't hear it. Yeah, it actually does. That's very cool. And thanks, guys. James Cipriano, thanks for hitting the super chat. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. So don't worry, you won't hear it. Yeah, it actually does. That's very cool. And thanks, guys. Those James Cipriano, thanks for hitting super chat. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. So don't worry, you won't hear it. Yeah, it actually does. That's very cool. And thanks, guys. Those. Okay, now I got rid of it. I was just trying to test something to see if I could get the live stream off a different page so I could read the chat better. It didn't quite work the way I thought it would. All right, so let's start off. We've got the latest radar. You can access this, by the way, if you want on your own. You can go to weather.gov and just click on the map near coastal North Carolina, and the radar should come up. So you can see that the outer bands are on the outer banks. Looks like a pretty solid band is starting to move on to near Cape Hatteras. And it's west of Jacksonville, North Carolina, but not quite to Wilmington. Somebody posted yesterday about the fact that nothing was happening in Wilmington and that it was bright and sunny. Well, that's because it was supposed to be that way, just so you know. And actually, if you look on the corner of the radar, the radar picture in the lower left, lower right, you can begin to see the outer edge of the eye. One of the things that was evident on the satellite, by the way, and I forgot to mention this, is the fact that the satellite does not. The satellite view this morning really shows how much the eye has degraded. You can see where the center is on there, but it is all cloud filled. So certainly that southerly shear took its toll on the core of the hurricane. And this is why it's probably not too likely that you'll see any strengthening from here on in. Plus, the circulation is now getting fairly close to land. Of course, now that I've said that, you watch. You wind up seeing the pressure fall and the winds pick up. We'll see. We'll check the recon in a second. But that's the view from the radar. We'll take another look here. I'll shift southwestward. These radars, by the way, remember, you're watching dated stuff. It's 10 minutes after 9 Eastern time. So if you're watching this video on the replay, you will be looking at dated information. So be sure to check weather.gov if you want to see latest radars later today. So here's the view from the radar from Wilmington, North Carolina. And the back edge of the bands are still offshore. There's nothing yet going on land, but you do see some of the echoes beginning to come ashore east of Jacksonville on this view. And of course, going southwest from there, Myrtle Beach, down to Charleston and beyond, there is no weather to speak of at the moment. And there probably won't be very much there today into the first part of tonight. Nothing has really changed materially when it comes to the forecast tracks that weather models, the hurricane track model guidance has been showing. The models have really kind of gotten very tightly clustered to deal with the situation between now and, believe it or not, Saturday, because it's going to take the next 3 days for this system to work its way inland. And this is where the rain part of the equation remains unchanged, folks. This is why you got to be really careful to just focus on the wind, because the wind issue obviously is a big deal for the coastal areas. If we can take the edge off the wind for the coast, that's a good thing. Of course, the wind issues are there as you go just inland. The further inland you go, the less the wind is an issue, and of course, the more the rain becomes an issue. And with a track like this, if you are north and eventually northeast of the track, you're talking about heavy rains for North Carolina, for at least the northern half of South Carolina. Okay. North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia, particularly central and western Virginia and into West Virginia. If we verify with these kind of tracks, you are going to be dealing with some heavy rains, the bulk of which in the areas to the north will not get underway until later in the weekend. Maybe not till later Sunday. You may start to get some fringe rains at some point, but it's going to be, that part's going to depend on the track. More on that later. And of course, the rain may eventually spread into Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. That will probably come later Monday or Tuesday. Just want to point out, by the way, before we move on, the The Europeans' track probably lies on the southern edge of this envelope of tracks in the early phase, and then gradually runs on the southern end of the track in the latter phase. So in other words, if you follow the blue line here, and I'll show you the European specifically. If you follow the blue line, that's the European model's track, basically, a little bit closer to the coast, then inland into Georgia, and then takes a sharp right turn, and then it kind of looks like this green track as it moves eastward off the New Jersey coast. It was a little further north than this, but off the New Jersey coast. Which was very interesting that the European did this. The GFS a little bit further to the north here on the initial approach, and then is kind of in the mix here with the other models that take the track further to the west, which it leads to another forecast dilemma for everybody down the road. Now, we'll take a look now. We're going to go to the weather models, and we'll explain what's happening here. Once again, as we look at the situation aloft, just to review this from yesterday, you've got this upper high sitting right overhead. If you watched the YouTube live stream last night, we had my colleague Andrew Pinheiro explained the Rex block concept. Where you basically have a figure-8 configuration in the upper atmosphere with the low sort of trapped in and around the upper high. And this is what we have here. And by the way, it's called a Rex block because it was found by, the concept was discovered by a meteorologist named, I believe, William Rex. And he got into all of that. But nonetheless, you see what's happening here. Upper high building to the north of the storm and to the west of the storm and to the east of the storm. And it's kind of stuck right in the middle in a no-flow zone. As the high splits and eventually rebuilds across the top, it's driven on a southwest course and then westerly and inland. This is, again, the European model. And, of course, eventually that ridge does break down, and you get the remnant low and upper trough that represents it to lift up to the northeast. This is now Monday night, and then by Tuesday, that trough is right along the coast. The European wants to push it further to the east, and then finally, as the westerly winds in Canada strengthen a bit, you see the trough move offshore. By the way, models have, it's interesting how this ridge in the east wants to stay in control. The models have really backed off on the strength of the trough coming through southeastern Canada. So the ridge in the east is still evident to some degree later next week and into next weekend. And you can see it here this is at day 10. So you got to be really cautious. A few of you, I've seen some questions regarding the longer term for later in the month, and GFS and some of the other models showing a rather cooler solution developing in the east with the westerlies in Canada coming down. But we got to be careful with this because of the fact that as we've seen the models have taken us down this road before, and it hasn't quite worked out. The GFS's view is very similar to the European. We don't really have too much of a difference here. It does have it on the North Carolina coast and actually takes it just inland as it drags it southwestward. It doesn't quite drag it as far southwestward as the European does. So it has a slow-moving, mostly inland low coming in near or just south of Wilmington for the hurricane, and then kind of making its way into South Carolina. This is very, very tough now, obviously, for the southern part of the coast of North Carolina and South Carolina because of we're going to have to deal with the fact that the storm could be literally on top of you or 10 miles west of you. The center of it could be a handful of miles inland or a handful of miles off the coast, and that could have a huge impact in terms of the weather conditions that you'll be experiencing, the tidal conditions that you'll be experiencing. The rain will be a constant either way, so I don't think you're still going to wind up getting heavy rains through all of this. And of course, it's a long duration event because here we are Sunday morning with the low somewhere in interior North Carolina, and here we're at Thursday. So you're looking at 3 days of rain, and at this point, it's still raining in a lot of this area. And the GFS takes that feature further west than the European before it kicks it out to the east. So that is its world that it is painting, and we can bring up the precip, which will be pretty useful here. And there it is, going inland, just barely inland. We're at now Friday night. So here we are, Thursday tonight, 8 o'clock, still just offshore. The pressure on the GFS, if you want to believe it, is 953, which is close to the pressure that we have right now. And then just inland, the weakening is going to be very, very slow depending on where that center is. If it's still partially over the water or over water, or completely over water, even by a handful of miles, the weakening rate is going to be very, very slow. So you're going to have strong winds for a long, long time, particularly along coastal areas, and even inland, you're probably going to have gales. And this is Saturday morning, just inland of the South Carolina coast near Myrtle Beach. So the areas to the east of that in North Carolina are going to have a strong southerly wind to contend with, right up and down the coast from Hatteras south and west. Notice on the northern fringe is a little bit of rain here on the northern fringe, but really you have to get down into southernmost Virginia, North Carolina to get into the super heavy rain, which is there. And then the remnant low turns northward and the rains spread northward. We have to be careful here. This could be underdone. The European has more extensive rainfall, and the rainfall amounts. I know there's a lot of concern for the area in Western Virginia and West Virginia here. So we'll give you the total rainfall amounts going into. I'm going to move it along a bit further because this is going to take us into Tuesday. Now, this is the GFS. There are some very heavy rain amounts of the 10-inch rain amount line punches into the Virginia Panhandle and the several inches up into West Virginia. But bear in mind, again, with the GFS taking that remnant low further west, that's going to have impact on the rain amounts in your area, in those areas, and lowering them. But if we wind up with that more easterly track that the European has, then you're going to have to shift a lot of this around. You're going to have to shift that rain area further north and further to the east. Right now, it's conceivable if it's that far west, there really won't be all that much to deal with from, say, northeastern Virginia on up through southern New England. Models don't really do very much with that rainfall, but this is completely in flux at this point. So please bear that in mind. That part of the forecast is also going to be subject to great change as we move ahead. Now, I'm going to check the latest Air Force reconnaissance aircraft reports, and I'm going to come back to you guys for a little while. We'll do some chatting and answer the questions that you might have. So let's check this out. We do have a reconnaissance aircraft in there. Looks like on the first pass, we have a pressure of 957 millibars. You can see the wind barbs near the center with the light blue. That's 10 to 20 knots, which is what you would expect in a hurricane, surrounded by the areas of stronger winds. The plane flew in from the southwest side, so it's coming in from a weaker side. Notice that when you came out on the other side, we have this large belt of hurricane force winds of 64 knots or higher that actually extend pretty far out of the center. Here's 33 north, okay? So you've got hurricane force winds of 64 knots or higher at flight level going all the way up to 34.5 degrees north and continuing as the plane flew westward to almost to 77 west. So the consequence of the storm expanding, the pressure gradient relaxing, to some degree, so that you have a lower max wind near the center, on top of the fact that we've seen a weakening of the core. But you've got hurricane force winds over a much larger geographic area, and you have gales over a much larger geographic area. So you have hurricane force winds that the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft is reporting extending out almost 100 miles from the center. That's pretty unusual. Typical of storms, as they gain latitude, this is what happens. Sandy, the same thing. As it moved northward and gradually made the transition over into a strong, an extremely powerful extratropical cyclone, the band of strong winds, the gales just expanded to several hundred miles or more from the center, but you didn't have 120 mile an hour sustained winds near this, as far as the strongest winds were concerned. And the stronger winds began to also move away from the center, and you can see it on the recon here too. You've got a belt of 83 to 96 knots now that extend out northeast of the center by roughly about 60, 70 miles, and then coming in on the northwest side, the northwest quadrant. I'm sorry, you got southeast winds on as you go toward the northeast of the center, and then as you go northwest of the center, you have a little belt here also of strong winds of 83 to 96 knots, about maybe a little less than 60 miles from the actual center of the hurricane. So this, by the way, remember that the expansion of the gales is not a good thing with respect to storm surge, and I think this is probably a good point. Well, we'll go to we're going to go to the storm inundation tool. I'm going to set it up. I'm going to come back to you guys first and chat for a bit, and then we're going to go to the storm inundation tool. I'm just going to set it up here very fast. And by the way, remember, you have access to this, and it's an extremely useful tool to have with regards to dealing with what you might expect as far as surges are concerned, and whether you should, whatever decisions you may have to make. This is on the National Hurricane Center's website, nhc.noaa.gov. So coming back to you here momentarily. Let me roll this down. Actually, this might be also a good time to just very quickly mention, for those of you who are interested, you can have what I've been kind of describing as a hype-free weather experience. If you join me on Patreon, you not only get the videos, the live streams on YouTube will obviously continue, but you will definitely get notified of those impending live streams. Plus, I haven't had much a chance to do it now lately, but I have been doing exclusive live streams on the Patreon platform for Patreon members. You can message me directly anytime. I will respond to that message in a very timely manner. And you'll get all my website posts with no ads. There's a Patreon app you can download to view all of this on an app on your phone in a clean, fast-loading way. It's just a couple of bucks a month, and it's a great way to support my channel. I'll put the link up on the chat board. I did put it up earlier, but I will put it up again momentarily. Thank you very much for those of you who have joined, and thank you very much for those of you who might consider joining. Okay, so we go to the chat board. Also want to first off thank James Cipriano again and Isaiah Jacob for hitting Super Chat today. Really, really appreciate it. It gets me a cup of coffee after this live stream is done. All right, just give me one moment. I'm going back on the chat board. Lindsay Oliver, you're saying this imagery, referring to what I'm showing, is significantly different than what I'm finding on TV. If you're still on, if you could explain that, I'd be very interested in what you mean. Sebastian P., you're in Goldsboro, North Carolina, starting to get breezy, gust of 30 miles an hour from the northeast. Sebastian, I'm curious, what is the general view of all of this with regards to what you're dealing with in North Carolina? How's everyone handling it? I'd be very interested in that. Let's see. Just want to see. Good morning, by the way, to Jason Schaefer and to Stephen Franco. Um, uh, Whopper Jr., there are so many fake news weather web channels on here that hype it up. I agree. I mean, I don't think I'm one of those, so I just hope you're not referring to mine, because I would, I'll be upset. Thanks, NYG23. It might, you know what? It might. I don't know that it'll get high-end tropical storm. I think it'll probably hold on to its hurricane status as it goes along. At this point, it's not going to really make too much of a difference. The angle at which the storm is coming in is going to be impacting storm surge, and also the fact that the rain part of this equation really remains unchanged. So, there's still going to be really excessive amounts of rain once it goes inland, whether it's a 4, 3, or 2, it's going to produce. Some of the biggest rainfalls that have occurred from tropical systems have actually happened from tropical storms that have stalled, as well as hurricanes too. But there have been a number of tropical storms. Agnes comes to mind, which was a minimal hurricane, a June hurricane, by the way, which made it even more unusual, that impacted the East Coast and brought 20 plus inches of rain to areas in the great state of Pennsylvania. So you don't need a Category 3 or a Category 4 hurricane to produce flooding rains. Second set of inner bands on the radar look like YouTuber. Second set of radar bands on look like 100 plus mile per hour gusts. Well, looking at what the Recon reported, which we just showed you a little while ago, I guess it's not entirely out of the question because of the fact that the plane was flying hurricane force winds extending out about 100 miles from the center. And by the way, just to give you a perspective in terms of where we are with this position-wise, we do have a 9 a.m. Update advisory here from the Hurricane Center. The position is 170 miles east-southeast of Wilmington, North Carolina, 220 miles east of Myrtle Beach. Present movement is northwest at 12, so it continues to slow down. The pressure, as we saw from the Recon, pretty much sitting at 956. We didn't see any real changes in terms of the watches and warnings that were put up yesterday. Center of Florence, I'm just reading very quickly through the advisory, 33.1 north, 75.1 west. Slowing down, they note the slowing to 12 miles an hour. General motion toward the northwest and a decrease in forward speed forecast to continue as we go through the day. And then a turn to the west-northwest and west at an even slower forward speed expected tonight and Friday, and a west-southwest motion forecast Friday night and on Saturday. So this is going to be on an absolute crawl. And yeah, if it's straddling the coastline through all of this, it may very well eventually weaken to a strong tropical storm, but it's going to be very, very, very slow in that weakening process. And we're talking long duration event here. And again, with respect to the storm surge, Cape Fear to Cape Lookout. This is from the Hurricane Center. I'm reading official information here. Cape Fear to Cape Lookout, including Neuse. Neuse. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Neuse. Pamlico, Pongo, and the Bay Rivers, 9 to 13 feet. North Myrtle Beach to Cape Fear, North Carolina, 6 to 9 feet. Okay, as far as the peak storm surge is concerned, and saying that the deepest water will occur along the immediate coast in areas of onshore winds where the surge will be accompanied by large and destructive waves, which is clearly obvious. And they are forecasting 20 to 30 inches of rain with isolated 40-inch amounts, and that is on the advisory. I see no reason to argue against that. Um, Getting pretty windy here in Myrtle Beach. Isaiah Jacob reports. You know what? I think what let me set this up. I'm going to bring up the interactive EDD, National Weather Service, the what's called the EDD. I don't know what the EDD stand for, but it's very, very good because you can pull up an interactive map and lay all the, we'll put all the wind barbs down and see what we're getting. I should have loaded this before we started today, so it's just going to take a little bit of time. Of course, I loaded the wrong one. All right, so let me just load that again. Patience with me, folks. When you're doing weather basically all day long from the minute you get up to the minute you go to bed, and aside from, you know, working your job, which is basically to do weather from the minute you go into work to from the minute you get out, you tend to get a few hiccups along the way and forget to do a few things. So this is setting up now. Why is it doing this? All right. Let me try this one more time. That's because I was loading the wrong one. All right. And now we're finally loading. Okay, sorry about that, folks. I'm really just trying to get a lot of stuff done here. I just saw an interesting. Where did it go? I'm letting it load. I just want to come back to. Oh, I just saw somebody say this, and I want to address it because it was really. Um, David Merritt, you're in Beaufort, North Carolina. Washington, just east of Greenville. It's breezy with some rain, nothing major at this point. Thanks for the report. That's, you know, whenever you guys put up reports like that, don't, you know, they are useful, especially, you know, when they're in an area where I'm not really overly familiar with. Um, but you know, so by all means, share what's happening in your neck of the woods if you're in the Carolinas. I lost your, you know, I can't seem to find it. I caught it out of the corner of my eye about, you know, shutting all media down when it comes to all of this. You know, if you go back to the beginning, if you joined me late, check out my rant at the beginning of the video. I may not necessarily disagree with you as far as that point is concerned. Anyway, let me see. Okay, so this should have loaded at this point, so we can. Let me set it up a bit here. All right. We'll increase the observation density. We'll increase the observation size so everybody can see. I don't think we need to see what the temperatures are because we don't care. So I'll take those off. And we'll apply that. All right, you know, I just bear in mind that there's like a ton of people going on all of this at the same time. We'll bring that on so you can see the coastline a bit better. Okay, almost ready, folks. And I'll move down into the North Carolina area. And we'll do a bit of a zoom. Awesome. Okay, so while that's loading, let me now bring it so you guys can see it. There we go. All right, so you can find this, by the way, if you go to its National Weather Service. Most of the local sites, most of the local National Weather Service sites have access to this, so we can at least take a look at what's happening. I've put on, it's loading with some of the winds that we have so far, and I actually added the peak gusts so we can take a look at those. In fact, let me add a little bit more info. See if we can get a little bit more information on this to load. So no, I don't want that. Um, we'll show as many networks as we can get on here. All right, so the offshore winds, and we will put the radar so we can at least see um, where the storm is. So that we'll load the radar echoes. Will load in just a second. So the wind gusts of 50 or higher are all offshore, and you can see that they're all from the northeast. So the storm is to the southeast of the coastline, moving on that northwesterly course. We've got some gusts from some of these buoys offshore to just shy of 57 miles an hour. I believe that the winds on this are in mph. The land wind barbs, sustained winds, 35, some 40 knot sustained winds. We don't have any 50 knot sustained wind flags yet because I think the band of 50 knot winds is not close enough yet. Winds right near the coast as those load up. And I'll go a little further north too, so you can see when you get out toward the Outer Banks and Hatteras, you're certainly getting gales out in the Outer Banks. We've got gusts to 38 near Cape Hatteras. There are so the gusts are lower, but still running in the high 20s as you move up the coast. And you can see as you get further and further north, the impact here in terms of the wind, it gets a little breezy, but it's nothing unmanageable. So the lack of impact that's going to happen on the northern fringe of all of this is clearly evident. Now, further south, as we move southward, I'm just trying to see where here's the South Carolina, North Carolina border. So you've got some breeze beginning to pick up at Myrtle Beach, just a gust of 21 from the northwest. There's a 31 mile an hour gust from, I'm not sure what weather station that is here. Oak Island, only a 10 mile an hour wind being reported there, but we do have some gusts in the high 20s. It's very early in the game. And look, just offshore, as some of these echoes begin to approach, you've got sustained at 35 and gusting up to 54 at a buoy offshore. But I'm not sure how many miles that is. I can't see what the scale is on this. It looks like 1 inch is about 20 kilometers, so about half an inch is 10 miles. That looks like to be about 25, 30 miles offshore. Radar is very slow to load here, as you can see. And here's another report. This is buoy 41013 reporting 35 knot sustained, gusting to 42 with 14-foot seas. 19-foot seas from this buoy that's well out by about 30 plus miles. So the big waves are building offshore and pushing on westward. I want to jump to the inundation tool again. So let me, where did I put it? That's not it. Okay, I did this. Here it is. So here's the inundation tool in terms of its forecast. The storm surge area here, we're looking at Pamlico Sound and the areas, the land areas on the western shores of Pamlico Sound, showing storm surges, water above ground. The yellow is, I got to bring the scale up here. Hang on a second. I just want to go over it. The red the red is 9 feet above ground, water 9 feet above ground. So from areas around New Bern, North Carolina, and upriver here are going to have substantial tidal flooding as the water backs up westward into the rivers. You have the red is 9 feet above ground, brown is 6 feet, yellow is 3 feet above ground, and blue is 1 foot. Now, we're going to see surges along the Outer Banks. When we go down toward the closer to Morehead City, you'll notice here we've got surges of water 3 feet above ground in areas surrounding Morehead City, which is close to the coast. Of course, surges along the beaches, Atlantic Beach, Pine Knoll Shores, Indian Beach, Fort Macon State Park. You head toward Newport, North Carolina, and here's where you have the areas that are going to be 6 and 9 feet of water, 6 and 9 feet or more above ground. Heading down south to the coast as we move toward Swansboro, tidal surges of some 6 foot plus on the ground. I'll see a little bit of red being indicated. I can't get closer than this on the tool. It'd be great if you could get even closer, but this is the maximum that it goes. It's kind of working my way down the coastline here as far as the storm surge tool. Topsail Beach, all of this area probably 3 to 6 feet or higher in terms of surge, and on the tool, and it's hard to see. There's probably some red in here as well, but it's just so fine that you have to get really, really close to see it. Carolina Beach, Curo Beach, and now of course we're in and around Wilmington. The surge here is less. Where the storm is at this point, of course, is going to be key to all the surge, and the beauty of the storm surge tool is that you can every time a new advisory comes out, if the track of the storm and the strength of the storm, or both, if they change, you're going to see the storm surge tool change as well, and the forecasts adjust as the track of the storm adjusts. So it's not a static forecast that comes out and remains basically unchanged. It is constantly changing. So if you're using it, you need to check it when the new advisories come out. The new main advisories come out at 5 a.m., 11 a.m., 5 p.m., and 11 p.m. And this way you can see how the storm surge has changed for your particular area. Okay, I'm back with you guys here. Let me take some more of your questions. Okay, let's see. I'm just want to see, will this hurricane increase in categories? At this point, Damien, I don't think so. I think, we've seen the core of the hurricane take a hit from the wind shear yesterday, so it's probably not likely. It's also starting to get pretty close to the coast where the circulation begins to starts to come over the land, and that's going to begin to have some impact as well. So I would be a bit surprised. Could you have some kind of minor burst? There's still a little bit of time for that. I don't think it really. I don't think it's really going to be enough to cause any kind of material change in what we're dealing with going forward. And remember, the impact with regards to storm surge and regards to the rain remains the same, regardless of whether this is a Category 1 or a Category 2 or even a strong tropical storm. The very, very slow movement of this, once it comes inland, is going to produce a couple of feet of rain. The Hurricane Center, in their advisory, the Hurricane Center is talking about 20, 30, and even some local amounts to 40 inches because this is going to be rain falling in some areas nonstop over 3 days. So that part of the equation is not going to change here going forward. I know some of you have addressed the issue and brought up the question about the power plants in North Carolina and the nuclear plants. I really can't speak to that. I don't know. I'm assuming that they've been built to withstand a Category 5 hurricane, but I don't know that for sure. Those of you who live there probably know a whole lot better than I do. Ruru 25 is the European model, still showing it following the coast south to Georgia. It does bring it down close to the Georgia-South Carolina border, but not that as close as yesterday. It kind of starts to make the left turn when it's near Charleston and moving northwestward from there. So honestly, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot to deal with on the southwestern side of the storm, as opposed to, say, the northeastern side or north of the storm center. But as far as going far enough south where there would be a landfall in Savannah, I don't think so. Joyce Mack, I look rested today glad I'm taking care of myself. Any other hurricanes a threat at this point? Well, you know, we do have the other storms out there. I didn't really spend a whole lot of time this morning taking a look at what's going on in the longer term. I did notice that some of the models do have various tropical systems, perhaps impacting the U.S. In the long-range period, but I don't want to just kind of speak off the top of my head without looking at things deeply. Isaiah is going into the leewards with tropical storm force winds. We've spent very little time dealing with that because Florence has been front and center. Joyce, I believe, still remains a subtropical storm. Just let me double check. Let's see. It is still a subtropical storm. That is actually, by the way, interestingly enough, I did happen to notice, if those of you that might be watching from the UK, from Ireland, keep an eye. Just let's start keeping a little bit of an eye on Helene, because the Joyce to its north is actually going to keep Helene moving northward, and eventually it's all going to turn northeastward. And we do have some of the models bringing a tight little remnant low of all of this ashore on Ireland in the next 4 or 5 days, I believe it was. So might want to pay a little bit of attention to that going forward. Just gonna start wrapping this up soon, folks. So let's see if the eye goes no further north. Okay, I guess I'm not sure who you're reporting to. I'm just kind of getting in the middle of your conversation here. Okay. All right. So you know what? We'll wrap it up at this point. Any special guests tonight? Asks Scott Briller. I don't know yet. Yesterday's special guest kind of turned up at the last minute. So one thing I may be able to do tonight is have a more continuous live stream. Because of the fact that we've got some other things going on here in the People's Republic of the State of New York. We have today is a primary day, so the news side will be devoting its coverage to the election. So that might free me up a little bit to do a little extra weather. So let's see what happens. I don't know about specifics in terms of the guest. That usually happens on the fly and at the last minute. But I will attempt to do something with respect to that. For all you latecomers, let me just once again do just a little bit of a shameless self-promotion. If you want, and you know, if you've been here on my channel long enough, you know that this is really pretty much a hype-free zone. You can join the Patreon platform that I've set up, where you can experience everything weather-wise in terms of weather information from my perspective in a hype-free, ad-free environment. The Patreon platform will allow you to message me directly, and I'll respond to it in a timely manner. We have all my website posts that I do from my websites will be on the Patreon platform, and you will get those with no ads. You can use the Patreon app to have this experience on your phone without any issues in a fast loading way, and it's only a couple of bucks a month. Starting up a couple of tiers in there. Starting at the $2 a month or whatever you think you would like to pay. There's an option for that too. That's fine. It's a great way to support what I'm doing, a great way to support my channel. And I think that we've had a number of members from YouTube, my YouTube audience, join. We're trying to grow it. So please, by all means, take a look at it if you're interested. And we do also do some videos that are exclusive to Patreon members. Trying to just work out the kinks with a few things regarding that. So you can, I just put a link up on the chat if you are interested, and thank you very much for considering it. This is also a good point to remind everybody again that please do not use any of the maps that you've seen here other than the official National Hurricane Center maps. in order to make any kind of decisions. And you can access those National Hurricane Center official maps and forecasts by going to nhc.noaa.gov or to your local National Weather Service page at weather.gov. We're a member of the Amazon Associates affiliate program designed to provide a means for this channel to earn some fees from Amazon. So if you click on the Amazon link that's on the description of this video or live stream and do your Amazon shopping there, Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin. It's not out of your pocket, and I can get myself a cup of coffee and a few cigars, and that's another great, easy way to support this channel. Thank you for those of you who hit Super Chat today. The schedule for the rest of the day, of course, you can look for website posts on Patreon and also on meteorologistjoechaffee.com. You can wait till tonight. We will have a live stream, our regular nightly live stream, which we're starting at 7 o'clock, and we're keeping it at that time at 7 p.m. Eastern. So we'll update you on everything that's going on as Florence gets closer and closer to a landfall. And of course, there's the Joe and Joe Weather Show with my colleague Joe Rayo that airs on Facebook. By the way, I want to mention with respect to the Joe and Joe Weather Show, here's another small rant. I am becoming increasingly frustrated and annoyed with Facebook on so many levels, not the least of which of the fact that they created a big problem for me regarding a few of the things that I've produced. And they have done a few things to me without explaining why. I'm not sure. I can't get answers. They don't respond. They don't have a customer service concept, yet they expect websites like mine to continue to pay money for ads. They are purposely and intentionally cutting down my reach. And not just my reach, but the reach of other weather people. I'm not understanding why they're doing that. I can tell you just from looking back at the numbers and where I have been from last year, my reach has been cut back by almost 80%. I don't understand it, and I don't know what it is they're doing other than the fact that they're expecting pages like mine to basically pay for people to watch. And well, I'm just not doing that. So I'm thinking very seriously about bringing the Joe and Joe show off, taking it off Facebook and bringing it here to YouTube. So let's see what happens with that, because I'm, like as I said, I'm just getting really fed up with what Facebook is doing. My own members don't even get notifications that I'm on. They get some, if they do get them, they get them 4, 5, 6 hours afterward. And I'm not going to do that. The YouTube audience is great. You're incredibly responsive. I'm not seeing, we're getting some we've been getting some very nice crowds here on a daily basis, and I'm very humbled and flattered by that, very much so. So I want that to continue. So hopefully we're going to be able to do that going forward. Okay, so that's the schedule for today. The Joe and Joe Show on Facebook at 9:15, YouTube live stream coming up at 7, and I just put the Patreon link up there for those of you who are interested, and thank you very much for your consideration. We will see you tonight